see all those planes flying? They're all going one way. That's all coming from military installations where Air Force is all flying one way. They're not flying into America, they're flying away from America. Where are they deploying to and why is it a big deal? Are we seeing ourselves fall into another war? I'm going to tell you my thoughts on that situation and also how literally we are getting all our embassies cleared out because one just got hit in Tel Aviv. And we're going to talk about what America's role in this situation is and what we believe. Also, while our focus has been on that, while our focus has been on the No Kings protest, you'll never believe there was a secret meeting at the Bilderberg group in Sweden. What did they discuss? It's mind-blowing. And it's also going to blow your mind who was there. Not just the elite. There's some people there that we need to talk about that just were on the list of people talking and people that are important. We're going to discuss that. And the reason is it's kind of scary. And then lastly, we're going to talk about, remember those two Chinese scientists that were coming over? They had something that was going to cause like a wheat blight. And basically they said if it would have took over and the wheat would have been devastated, not only here, but also the exports, it would have destroyed America. Are we ready for agroterrorism? That's what we're seeing. Isn't it weird how all of a sudden this week in Mississippi, we had what we call an Asian needle ant that's causing devastation in a lot of places with allergic reactions. Are we seeing just strange things happening with agriculture? We need to talk about it because remember, what you don't realize is, they're pushing for petri dish food, petri dish stuff, things grown in warehouses. What better way if all of a sudden we destroy our grounds with insects and certain kind of chemicals that are destroying the earth? Whew, big deals. Let's talk about all these stories today. This video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to our channel. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new, please go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. And if you don't, that's okay. Let us know what you think about the content. Now let's jump into the stories of the day. First, let's talk about these planes that are flying across the United States. And this is a military deployment. Listen to this. It says 15 plus U.S. Air Force's KC-135 refueling tankers are heading east. All spotted on flight radars in the rare Sunday surge. Something that's unprecedented, they said. This kind of movement is highly unusual and also certainly tied to a rapid escalation in the Middle East. Fighter jets or bombers may be flying very, very soon. It says massive U.S. forces deployment underway. Over a dozen tankers. The point of the tankers is when our main fighter jets get in the air, they're the ones that fill them up. Another report, at least 25 air tankers are en route to Europe and the Middle East today from the U.S. Are we seeing the escalation of war? Now, all of a sudden, Iran started just nailing casualty situations in places in Tel Aviv and in Israel. Israel's been very strategic in where they've put these missiles. They've actually taken out leaders. They've taken out oil reserves. They've taken out the parts of the nuclear buildup. Now, they've been very strategic. They've not hit these big cities and taken out a lot of the main supreme leaders, even though there's been rumors that he's already passed. But the truth be told, there's a different fight of war here. Israel's been very strategic. Iran is just going crazy. Now the situation is this. All of a sudden, I think Iran has given all it could because when they sent these last few bombs in, they said, no, look, we're going to dismantle. We're stopping the nuclear talks. We're going to do all this. We're not going to do any kind of nuclear warheads anymore. We want peace. Well, it's because they just land blasted Israel with casualty attacks, and Israel has not done this yet. So the question is this going to escalate? I think for the longest I said, well, this will be something short and done. I really did, especially when Trump said, no troops going in to help fight. And then all of a sudden you start seeing these air tankers and these all this military deployment over to the Middle East and Europe. What's going on? You know what's so crazy though? Have you noticed? Since we've talked about this, you hadn't heard Zelensky's name once, have you? You haven't talked about Russia, Ukraine. See, this is what happens. And again, I actually support Israel. I'm one of those Christians who believe that there's a place for Israel in the future. So therefore, I do want them to thrive. I don't care if they choose to, go after Iran. That's between them. I didn't say that America should be in that fight, but I do support them in whatever their endeavors are. Here's the thing, though. This is kind of like, if you remember 2020, everybody was always getting a flu, shot. Did you notice in 2020 and the 2021, 2020, nobody even talked about the flu anymore. It was just gone. Nobody even got, treated for it because there was something new that you needed this for. I feel like we're kind of in the same predicament where, Ukraine, everybody's kind of got tired of it. We've spent $250 billion. Tons of people's gotten filthy rich off of it. Let's just don't forget about it. Let's don't talk about it anymore. I ain't heard one discussion about Ukraine and Russia lately. Who even knows what's going on over there? Do you? See, this is how we are so easy manipulated because our focus has now been on this new war, this new thing. Isn't it kind of like the flu shot? No one claimed to have the flu back in 2020 and 2021. Why? Because there's this new thing you got. Well, watch. It'd blow my mind if Russia and Ukraine situation probably won't very much die down this next few weeks, especially if all of a sudden this one escalates. And now we're flying jets over and flying tankers over and deploying military over. What's coming to the Middle East? This is a big deal. I honestly believe this is a big deal. Not because, here's the thing. Not because America is just going to say we're going to put troops there for 20 years. I don't think that's going to actually happen. I really don't. I'm not saying we won't do proxy through it. I'm not saying we won't provide them with some military assets. Here's what I think is going to happen. I believe you're going to see an escalation with Iran getting hit pretty hard. And I believe then you're going to see a lot of the Middle East, not really Saudi Arabia. I believe you're going to see people like Pakistan and some of those try to come against Israel. Did you hear that story that Jordan is actually helping Israel? So it shows that people know that Iran is a bad player, that Jordan is helping Israel. Actually, Saudi Arabia, if you listen to what they said, they tried to demean the attacks, but then when they realized the attacks wasn't on the people, it was on the infrastructure, they actually kind of got their nose out of it too. So I believe everybody realizes that, the people of Iran does not like their leadership, and I believe this is just going to help make new leadership there. Doesn't mean if you agree with it or not. Again, we're in America. It doesn't really pertain to us. Let's just stay our nose out of it. But I just thought that was kind of unique that, Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton and all these Democrats, instead of talking about the Ukraine situation with the Ukrainians, they've done taking it off, and we've got the new thing. It's kind of like the flu in the 2020. Nobody knew where it went. Zelensky, he won't be around much longer because this is how we do. We're so manipulated and we don't even really realize it. Now, before we go any further, a word from today's sponsor. What I've learned is that sometimes our globe and the people that's in charge kind of like control. And part of control is maybe things like what we've seen back a few years ago. That's why today's sponsor, The Wellness Company, may benefit you the most. The Wellness Company provides emergency preparedness medicine. One thing I've learned is I want to be independent. If I want to be independent, part of independence comes from having the medicine I need at my home to where I don't have to go to the doctor. I don't have to go to the pharmacy. Prime example, my wife just took 3 of our children on a youth retreat. It was out of town. We don't know anything about that area. She had Zofran if they got nauseated. She had an EpiPen for safety. Not only that, she had ivermectin if they got sick. There's nothing better than knowing how to be prepared. And prescription medicine is a big part of that. Check out my sponsor today, The Wellness Company. Go to twc.health/themacs. That is twc.health/themacs. When you use the promo code THEMACS, you save $30 along with getting free shipping. These kits, truthfully, they are a lifesaver. Check out twc.health/themacs, The Wellness Company. You'll be glad that you did. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of times we do sponsorships, but The Wellness Company and having medicine, especially when things are crazy, is not a bad thing. Please check them out. If I tell you about any sponsor, I think they're all very good sponsors, but this one in particular, to me, is just a good sponsor. When we talk about gold and emergency preparedness and food, those are things that we all need. And The Wellness Company is a good one. Now let's go back to the video. I want to mention one thing about farmers. There's this new report that farmers are going to not be able to get crops up because of the illegal immigrant situation. And then Trump's kind of kowtowed down. This is the problem I have with this. Because, for instance, Chuck Schumer came out yesterday and stated that he wants 10 million illegal immigrants with amnesty. He wants to give them legal citizenship. See, here's the problem. These big farmers, a lot of those are not actually the farmer, it's the big ag companies, the big multi-billion-dollar companies. Do you know what the average wage of some of these illegal immigrants are? Anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 a year to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, 7 days a week. Now, here's where I want to push back on the Democrats and push back on bigger industries that's hiring illegal immigrants. Do you see what's happening here? Basically, they're getting cheaper labor and almost like slave labor compared to hiring Americans. Well, we've kind of all known that. What happens though? This is the part you've got to pay attention to. What happens if all of a sudden the Democrats get their way and they get amnesty? So the same farmers that's complaining about hiring Americans for higher money, if all of a sudden these people become citizens, then they go under our law, which means minimum wage goes in, which requirements for work goes in. So such as these liberal states like California, which is one of our biggest farming hubs, all of a sudden all those policies with health insurance and all these policies with all this stuff comes in where they have to pay for it. See, here's the thing. When they pay those $20,000 wages and they're not considered legal citizens, they also get to partake of a lot of benefits and grants that the government gives them. So what we're actually doing, we're like double and triple paying for these people. Not because the farmer is the bad guy, but big ag has found loopholes. Politicians have felt loopholes. So you're in a lose-lose situation. If you keep these people here and pay them low wages to get your food, you're giving them slave labor, so they're not making a lot of money, but then they're getting all the government benefits, the health care, all the incentives to being here, the free housing. So we're still paying for them. So then if you give them amnesty, then all of a sudden they're not making any less than the typical American, so then they took their job. Here's the problem. We need to just say Americans need to focus on America first. We don't need to be hiring people, and this is where I'm different on the president. I believe the president's making a huge bad move when it comes to FDA and USDA's push to keep illegal immigrants here for certain automation and certain farm tools and for certain farming practices and things like that. If the farmer is being dishonest and they're hiring these people dishonestly, then why do we want to support that? And I know people are like, well, who's going to pick the crops they're going to ruin? Well, first of all, we've made a bad bed and now we've got to sleep in it. I mean, again, we've become so dependent on everybody else to do our jobs for us. And I think this is a bad policy. So we're in a lose-lose situation when it comes to keeping them here to help for cheap labor because we're still paying for them. Then if we, try to give them amnesty, then of course that's going to make a big problem because then they're going to make what all the regular Americans are making. So then the food prices are still going to go up and it's still taking American jobs. The only alternative is to deport, and that's what we should be doing. That's what we all voted for, and as sad and as hard as that may be for someone that's been here 20, 30, 40 years, if they've been here illegally, they are a criminal and they need to go back. So I think this is a practice that we don't want to shed light on because we want to support farmers, and I do. I'm a farmer. I grow my own food. But man, I'm out here, at 4 a.m. in the morning all the way to 8 or 9, 8 p.m. at night trying to raise food just for myself. So when you think about it that way, when all the people depend on someone else growing their food for them and trucking their food for them, that's why they probably are in support of immigration, because they can't do it themselves. But what we're going to wake up to one day is if we can't fend for ourselves and we become so dependent on a system, then we're going to do whatever the government tells us anyway, which is meaning amnesty or keeping them here because ultimately they're getting our food. We don't want to get our hands dirty. That's what basically is just happening, because all of a sudden Trump says, well, look, I don't know if we're going to deport them. Why? Because he knows Americans, they don't even know how to grow food. I mean, it's almost like a warning to me. I thought that was just the craziest thing, is that we're keeping the people that's in the food industry here, because what we've realized is they don't know what they're doing. Americans can't grow their own food. The only other avenue that he's keeping people here for hotel and leisure. He wants to keep the vacations going, baby. What that shows is Americans are weak, dependable, and all they want is a good time. And sadly, they have no idea what it means to work for their food. Prime example of what I'm talking about when we talk about food. Agroterrorism. No one wants to talk about this, but this is something that needs to be talked about, because the risk of food and famine is bigger and bigger, not only because we're modifying and engineering different crops, the immigrant situation, but to be honest with you, I imagine if you went to a school, a public school system, and you said, we're going to grow crops, How could you grow crops? I bet you there wouldn't be 10% of people in main cities that their children knew how to even grow a plant. You had to grow 1 ounce of food. They wouldn't. So when we come to the point of realizing if we're so dependable on this system, we're so dependent on the people picking our food, we're so dependable on the big ag providing it, what all of a sudden if all that goes away? So this is why they're easily going to manipulate you into, a petri dish fish, or lab-grown meat, or things grown inside and manufactured inside, where this is like the GMO lettuce is not actually in the ground. It never sees water and soil. It sees, basically cell, mutation that they're getting from literally. They wanted to replicate what cancer cells are, and that's how they're actually replicating meat so fast. You do realize that, right? When they actually are making cell meat and they're making petri dish meat, they are replicating how cancer grows in the cells and how rapid it does. So now they're trying to replicate that with your meat. Do you think that's healthy? Well, if all of a sudden these Chinese scientists got their way, listen to this. These people were these Chinese scientists were trying to smuggle in a wheat blight into the U.S. and trying to modify it, genetically modify it. That's what a lot of these big billionaires are doing right now. Had they succeeded, they could have destroyed much of the American wheat crop, which would have caused untold harm to us, but not only us, to everyone who relies on our exports, which is a lot of other nations, which also is a lot of our animals and livestock. China already destroyed the orange crop doing essentially this with the HLB, the citrus greening bacteria that suspiciously grew up in America, knocking out 90% of the Florida's orange industry. They already know that we're in a state of war. I thought that was a very good writing, and that was from a gentleman named Will Tanner. I want you to listen to this. This is from our Mississippi News. It says, a newly invasive ant species is officially in Mississippi and people are having near fatal allergic reactions after being bitten. They've now been confirmed in 8 Mississippi locations, including the Gulf Coast, and these experts are saying they're called Asian needle ants. It's weird how they call it Asian. Kind of weird, huh? These ants sting like a wasp and leave your skin in a bad way. The venom can trigger anaphylaxis, a life-threatening allergic reaction, and causes swelling, trouble breathing, and even fainting. These things are now being seen, and they're like swarms. The queen fly through the air and make new colonies, and now we're seeing more and more of this jump through different states. The Mississippi State University are tracking the spread of these Asian needle ants, non-native to this area, but now we're starting to see the dangers of people having fatal or near fatal interactions with these insects. We just talked about genetically modified mosquitoes a few months ago with Bill Gates. We talked about all this agroterrorism with the war on the farm. And all of a sudden we have this random Asian beetle ant that shows up that's named Asian needle ant that is causing mischief and harm. They haven't talked about what it's doing to animals yet. It's too new. What can it do to your crops? It's too new. But this comes on the cusp of a warning for July 4th for bioterrorism. It comes on a warning where there's two cases of 3 different scientists coming in to try to bring in certain worms, certain nematodes, and certain blight to cause damage to our crops. The food shortage is going to be so real. You know why I know it's real? It's because why do you think all the biggest ag players are in the pharma industry? Why do you think all the biggest ag players are now growing your meat in a petri dish inside? Why do you think all this is they're not worried about the cow anymore. They're worried about the cells of one dead animal to turn around and use this cancer agent basically to make it grow, and now you've got lab-grown 3D printed meat. That's why I know it's coming. And if you can't grow your own food and you don't have a good stockpile, then guess what? You're going to be eating the petri dish food because you cannot make it. I mean, look, we are so desperate to not grow our own food and to still be comforted in America that we're willing to keep illegal immigrants here. 77 million people voted to deport. But no, we want to keep the ones that are here growing food because we realize that Americans can't grow their own food and they think too highly of themselves to go out there and get their hands dirty. That's what basically has been seen with Trump's backing down of getting rid of the people that the USDA wants to keep, basically. The same FDA and USDA that wants to keep these immigrants are the same FDA and USDA that is giving all these grants and all these passes away for this food to be grown and mutated into petri dishes, and also allowing for, guess what? They're allowing for the permits to keep having this GMO crops grow on our grounds too. What we're finding out is there's some evilness there. And that leads me to really our last story that we're going to talk about today, the Bilderberg Group. While our focus has been on the No Kings events and Israel and Iran, let's talk about the Bilderberg Group. Now, you know, if you're a tinfoil hat wearer like myself, you know that's a name that you've heard a lot about. But listen to this. The Bilderberg Group's 2025 published the agenda. Listen to their agenda that just happened in Sweden. And then we're going to talk about who was there. On the list of the discussions are depopulation and discussing replacement Western populations and migrants. In the last 15 years, we've gone from legacy media denying the group's existence to now openly pushing what they're actually doing at the Bilderberg. Guess who was at the Bilderberg? Peter Thiel was there. Peter Thiel, who just got permits to ultimately be a part of Palantir, you know, that's now going to be into our government a little bit more. Now you're like, oh, that's against Trump, that's against the Republicans. No, listen, keep on going. Why do you think Stacey Abrams is there? Now, Stacey Abrams, who was a failed government candidate, who got ultra rich off our government funds and NGOs, she's one of the main people there for America. She is over the SageWorks Productions. She is the CEO, and she is going to be there at this event, or was there at this event, talking about the same things. Isn't it weird how they're using this woman who was never successful in media? I think what I've learned about politics is this. You actually don't have to be successful in it. You just have to be able to be used and be a puppet. It's kind of like Joe Biden. Joe Biden actually was not a successful, really, senator or president, but he was able to be used as a puppet. And that's exactly what the Lindsey Grahams and all those kind of people are. I think that's what Stacey Abrams is. Stacey Abrams made like hundreds of millions of dollars off the government and didn't never do anything for the government. Literally, never even won her election in Atlanta and in Georgia. So it blows my mind that she's there. Also, there's this, Albert Bourla. You know, Pfizer, yeah, he's there. Of course, Google's there. Also, there's some names of some U.S. individuals. They're like the Director of Strategic Planning for the United States. What does that actually mean? We don't even know what that is. You know what else I thought was kind of unique? There's also several Republican representatives there. People you may have not heard of. Certain U.S. congressmen. Just look up the list. All you got to do is type in Bilderberg's list of people attending this event. So while our focus has been on all this, they're literally discussing, listen to their topics. Transatlantic relationships, Ukraine, U.S. economy, Europe, Middle East, authority and access, defense innovations, AI deterrence and national security, proliferation, geopolitics around energy and critical minerals, depopulation and migrational rights for certain areas of the world, especially in the West. Depopulation and migration. Why do we, and again, it's so secretive. Nobody's allowed to go into this meeting but the people that are invited to attend. So do we not find that a little strange that's going on at this point? Again, I always say this. When something's dabbling in front of you, kind of like the 2020 situation, but then there was no flu. Zero flu. Now all of a sudden we're dabbling, Ukraine in front of you. All of a sudden it's kind of getting old news. Let's talk about, Iran and Israel situation. And really, have we heard Ukraine any? No. While we're worried about the protests going on, there's some major shady stuff going on at the Bilderberg, talking about depopulation and migration issues. And some of the biggest people like Pfizer's there, the Director of Strategic Planning, whatever that means for America, the Palantir, a guy that just got access to all our rights. Basically, he's there now. I'm just trying to figure out, what are we missing? The things that we should be paying attention to? Sometimes it's the things that our eyes are not on. A lot of people are not talking about the ants and the agroterrorism and the dangers of our farms, of growing food. That's why we talk about it so much. Because a shortage of food makes you completely dependent on whatever the government says. While we're worried about all this stuff going on with wars, all of a sudden we realize that there's a whole group meeting, invite only, no cameras, in this shady, shadowy situation in Sweden, talking about depopulation and bringing in migration to fill those holes. That's exactly what's happening. So it's something we should be paying attention to. Guys, let me know your thoughts on today's video. God bless.